Good evening and welcome to another installment of the Dark Monday at Merlin series. The year 2021 marks the 30th anniversary of NEAT, New English American Theatre, and we are currently in the middle of our 8th year of monthly Dark Monday shows here at Merlin. In 2013, NEAT founder Charles C. Urban approached Merlin with the idea of a monthly series of English language entertainment, and since then we've been presenting a new show every 4 weeks. Everything from full-length plays, one-act plays with many German and European premieres among them, live radio plays, variety shows, and improv theatre, but also evenings dedicated to poetry and music. Due to the situation at hand, NEAT will now be presenting our future Dark Monday shows online until further notice via the Merlin YouTube channel on a regular monthly basis at 2000 hours on the accustomed first Monday of the month. These performances are free of charge and supported by the Federal Government Commissioner for Culture and the Media in cooperation with the DATS, Deutsch-Amerikanisches Zentrum, and of course, Merlin Kulturzentrum. If you would like to support the supporters, you may purchase tickets and vouchers for all shows at Merlin on their homepage, merlinstuttgart.reservix.de. NEAT, New English American Theatre, is proud to feature aspiring as well as established published authors, poets, playwrights, and give them a forum to present their own works on a regular basis with the Dark Monday at Merlin series. In the past, we've presented several new full-length plays by Michael Hilton, introduced the young Scottish poet Archie MacJoyce to our Stuttgart audience, hosted the award-winning poet Stephen Thomas, and it's become an annual tradition to feature the Writers in Stuttgart collective every January. Another opportunity to present budding playwrights is our annual one-page play festival. Since 2016, the Dark Monday presentation in the month of March has most often been dedicated to the work of Daniel Regelbrugge, prolific American author and poet. His texts are scintillating and spellbinding, and it's always a treat to hear him present samples of his latest work in the fields of poetry, prose, and short stories. Joining the author tonight are Susan Schwartz, Christopher Parkinson, and Pascal Dieterich. Together, they will read from a wide selection of his latest texts. To date, Daniel Regelbrugge has published 8 books. They can be ordered online at Amazon.
The first poem is Walk. A sincere rendered, loving plea to the one who invokes all of me, but wordless in the fields obscured. This is no plea that shall be heard. For radiance come of beating hearts, you are my blessed, fairer part. Beneath the stars, beyond the skies, I only want to kiss your eyes. As smiles arisen from the dross, move up your cheeks at any cost. Adorned countenance or face, eternal is your state of grace. With patience witness storms I bring, I know no other song to sing. Then pulling stillness from the fire, we move as one to then come higher. From the fields unto new plains, our center is not e'er the same, evolving like a silent plea. Come, take my hand, come walk with me. The story that we're reading this evening is The Ascent. The man awakened from a deep sleep in snowy fields. Nothing had followed him back this time, no one. There was a stillness raging all around him, and yet, somehow, a cluster of snow flurries urged him up from the ground. He was happy to be lifted. He was happy to rise. He gathered his satchel and looked into the unimaginable distance that still stretched before him. How much longer? How much further? He turned his eyes from the swirling sky, mired somewhere in the inexorable transition between starlight and dawn, over to the beleaguered ass curled on a bank of snow besides what must have been, in warmer seasons, a flower bed. The fire that the man had made for them had died out in the night, and both of them were freezing. He labored over to his companion and, taking a handful of berries from the satchel, took a knee at her side. The man murmured to his friend in some obscure language and patted her softly as he offered the berries. She lifted her head with warmth glimmering in her eyes and ate gratefully. They had already journeyed more than 1,000 leagues together. The man had ridden upon the beast's back as the two of them had moved through the respective fields and landscapes of the man's wretched life. He had gone from land to land, from place to place, in a slavish attempt at making amends to people he had known through the years for having been brought into the world with such endless potential. But he had somehow never realized it. And the mule, she had been witness to it all.
The folly of apology. For what? Nobody cares in this pale and hollow world when people underachieve and disappoint. Do they? There's not truly any semblance of accountability, is there? The man couldn't decide. Nevertheless, he was tired of the game. He was tired of making apologies for being who he was, for feeling, for really believing that he would become the one he was intended to be, and that the world would twinkle a little brighter for it. But over the long leagues the man and the mule had traversed, the realization of self seemed only to be receding further into distance, ineffable, unattainable.
The man shuddered and looked once more into the ass. She was trembling on frozen earth. The man sighed in recognition of unavoidable decisions to be taken. He circled the fire pit a few times, hands clasped at his back. Before finally he nodded and sprang into action in a fit of resolution. She watched as he hurriedly threw the satchel over one shoulder and his axe over the other. And then he came over to her. She tried to rise up onto her legs, but they were trembling so for all the leagues traversed, bearing the man unto his destiny. And so he did what any friend would do for another. He stooped and, being sure to lift with his knees and not his back, he lifted his friend with all his might and threw her over his shoulders. It was his turn to bear her burdens.
10 hours later, the sun and the moon were once again about their eternal, mystical dance for supremacy in the sky. The confluence of a gasp and a sigh. As two drunkards keeping watch at the gates witnessed the man lurching along the path with a mule stretched across his shoulders, one of the drunkards asked of the other, tearing at the film of forgetfulness that covered his eyes,
"Look at this lot. What the hell's he doing?"
The other stirred and rose to peer at the figure approaching the gates.
Well, he must be fit as fuck, innit?
You think?
Asked the first drunkard. The second regarded him with pity.
Are you seriously asking that question? The man's got a fucking donkey on his shoulders. Of course he's fucking fit.
Yeah, all right. But what's he doing here then?
As if on cue, both of the drunkards looked up from the narrow sphere of lantern light in which they had passed the previous several hours, days, and years on end, onto the monolithic shape that obscured the afternoon sun from them, and muttered absently,
He's come to make the ascent.
The first drunkard spit and said,
Nah, it couldn't be that. He hasn't got anyone with him. No legions, no witch, no sorcerer. He hasn't even got a minstrel with him.
Nevertheless,
said the other dismissively. The first drunkard scratched at his chin.
Well, what shall we do then? Boiling oil?
oh yes, by all means,
Said the other.
douse him and his ass with boiling oil.
The first drunkard regarded the other with urgency.
Wait, we can't do that. What about the donkey? We can't pour oil on the man's ass. What's that ass ever done to either you or me? You tell me that. I'm not going to sit up here like a coward and pour oil on another man's ass, that's for sure.
The other grins sardonically.
Well then, what shall we do? What do you suggest?
The first drunkard scratched at his chin once more.
I suppose we could open the gate and let him prepare.
For the ascent.
The other concluded.
Yes.
Agreed.
Said the other.
Let us open the gate and let this man and his ass take some respite before they make the attempt.
And so the two drunkards descended from their perch atop the gate and rather clumsily set about opening the gates to an ancient place which, by all accounts, did not truly exist.
Well, that's a bit daft, isn't it? We're here, so clearly the place exists.
Said the first drunkard. The other regarded him with disdain.
I haven't said anything, have I? You're talking to yourself again.
The other shrugged his shoulders and grunted. The two men laboriously turned the winches and the gears, let loose the counterweights and the emergency security mechanisms, and after a few moments, the posts of the gates slowly withdrew themselves from the frozen, barren earth into which they had last entered, and soon the gates opened. The man with the ass stretched across his shoulders raised his right hand in a salute of both recognition and gratitude. A rumor of promise was born on bitter cold wind, and somewhere the fates acknowledged the arrival of a potentially worthy sojourner. The man took a step forward, but the second drunkard immediately obstructed the way and instructed the other to desist. He raised an ancient-looking lantern before him and said,
Hold it right there and state your purpose.
I cannot tell you my purpose, for I do not know where it is I've come. What is it exactly that one may achieve at this place? He asked, looking beyond the two drunkards unto the village, and further still.
The two drunkards regarded one another incredulously. The first asked impatiently over the shoulder of the second,
What the hell do you mean? You don't know where it is you're come, and you don't know what can be achieved here. That's just rude, insulting, through and through, if you ask me, ain't it? How the bloody hell did you get here if you didn't know where the hell you're going in the first place?
The man smiled. Apparently it was just my good fortune to arrive at this place. The second drunkard interjected.
What about that ass you're carrying there on them shoulders? What's that about, eh?
He asked suspiciously. I need a place to set her down where she can recover from the long journey and regain her strength. Is there a quality stable hereabouts? The second drunkard scratched at the stubble on his chin.
How is it that she's so fatigued when it was you doing all the carrying?
The man laughed. She has borne my weight for a long time, so now it's my turn to do the same. The two drunkards regarded one another again. This time they peered more deeply into the swirling evening sky and into the recessions of the snowbanks, the rocks, and the trees that surrounded. Finally, the second drunkard said,
Right. There's a first-rate stable just there, 100 meters up your right. There's also a fantastic inn just 100 meters further on the left. Oh, and in between there's a well. I suspect the stabler will be expecting you to fetch your own water for the ass.
The man nodded in appreciation. He moved on, with the mule stretched across his back, as if everything were perfectly in its time and place, as if he was. The two drunkards remarked in his wake, almost in unison,
Strangest bloody thing I ever saw. The man came unto the stable and saw that there were 3 horses berthed in stalls on the right side of the modest but elegantly crafted wooden shelter, and 3 more on the left side. But in the center there was a free stall. The man looked about and did not see the stabler here, so he strode forth and gently set the mule down about the pile of hay that was gathered there. The ass wheezed in discomfort, but the man calmed her and murmured once more in that obscure language, reassuring his friend that everything would be okay. That there's always hope for those who look for it, feel for it, for those who believe that the possibility exists for something more. The man smiled at the mule and proffered some more berries which he had procured from his satchel. Once more the beast ate, and it was good. The man grimaced at the recognition that his satchel was now empty. He needed food and water for them both. He scanned the surrounding stalls and saw that there was plenty of food and some pails of water there for the other horses. He knew it would be a simple thing to take some for the mule, but he was a stranger in that place, and something inside told him that there would be no more shortcuts permitted to him. He stood inside. He fastened his axe with a strap on the inside of his great wolf-skin coat, and he went out. He was now fully dark outside. He saw that lantern swaying above the door to the inn. He rippled past the well, and it occurred to him that he could not actually feel any part of his own body beyond the insipid, cold ache in his bones and his joints. It had been a long and hard journey, and he knew that it was not yet ended. He smiled defiantly amid a veil of darkness at winter's eve. Good, he muttered to himself. Fucking bring it.
He came onto the great wooden door to the inn and pushed it open. He stepped in and was met with the sound of rhapsodic, sweeping violin music. There were torches in every corner and candles placed on a row of 10 or 12 long tables on each side of the hall. The music was at once thunderous and mysterious, as if resounding in the sky itself. But no matter how hard the man peered into the shadows between the flames set about the hall, he beheld no player. Finally, he remembered why it was he'd come there, so he shuffled about and went to the man at the long bar. The fellow there was meticulously cleaning his wares and did not seem to even notice the newcomer until the other knocked loudly upon the oaken counter. The barkeep stood and turned, and the man gasped. The other had thick patches of skin coarsely manifest where instead he should have had eyes. Instantly the man was transported in his mind to the pit of misshapen, hacked, and abbreviated bodies at the side of which he first came to understand humanity, and everything of which he wanted no part. Crimson devils circled the dreamed sky, propagating sulphur and malaise, mistrust, and division with every beat of their massive black wings. The barkeep kept asking, "What can I get you?"
Nothing, nothing. Just make it stop,
said the man within his own mind, though he had not spoken these words aloud. "Well, nothing certainly makes me job a fair bit simpler," said the barkeep, his head tilted as if he were actually regarding the other. "But how's about we start with a bit of hot wine whilst I set about getting some food for you and your ass?" The violin music began to escalate once more. The man shuddered.
Yes, that would be very helpful and appreciated,
he said, scarcely managing to regard the other's face for its lack of eyes. The barkeep poured a mug of hot wine and set it upon the bar. Then he disappeared into some other space, and the man realized that it had not occurred to him to ask how the other had known what he was thinking, or about the mule. Nevertheless, he took a sip of wine. The music soared and dived and then soared again. It extolled.
Soon, the barkeep returned with 2 pails full of carrots and apples and a warm bowl of beef stew and some bread for the man. The man scarcely managed to nod his head in appreciation before he had his face buried in the bowl. Somewhere out beyond the walls of the inn, in the frozen distance, a maelstrom of stillness was gathering. The fates. When the man had eaten, he finished the mug of wine and placed 3 silver coins upon the counter.
Thank you for the coin. Are you not also in need of a room for the night?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Are you sure? As you see, we have no other guests this eve.
The man sighed and looked to the empty mug. The barkeeper nodded and went to get more. He poured another mug. Crimson steam rose from the mug like inquisitive asps. The man took the mug and drank deeply. After a spell, he said, "Look, no, I apologize. Forget about looking. This place is fucked up. You are fucked up. I appreciate the food and the drink, but I wouldn't stay here the night if my life depended on it. Nothing against you, but what happened to your eyes? And where is this music coming from if there's no player in the hall?" The barkeep grinned as he set about wiping down the counter.
What music? I don't hear anything.
You don't hear the violin?
Without interrupting his attentive scrubbing at a non-existent blemish on the bar, the other shook his head.
It doesn't work like that. Anyone who enters this place hears the music in their heart. No one else can hear it, not even me, with all my attuned senses.
He said with a laugh.
But I will tell you that you need to pay attention to whatever you heard. If the music sounded like a lament or a candle song, then you must go far away from this place, because you are not ready.
The man nodded in understanding, and then wondered why he had bothered, since the barkeep could not see.
You're welcome. I've not ever been told of anyone who has succeeded in what you attempt. I myself tried it once, and you see what became of me.
He crossed the palms of his right hand over the place on his face where he should have had eyes. You don't say.
Indeed, I do say. Everyone in this place has attempted to make the reach, but for all sorts of different reasons, none of us ever succeeded. Others have tried, of course, and did not survive at all.
You don't say. The barkeep turned and moved away towards that other space.
We laugh at our own peril.
The man waited for the other to be gone and then leaned over the bar to pour himself another mug of hot wine, but then decided to take the whole pot. He set another 2 coins down on the bar, took the pails, the pot of hot wine, and left. When he returned to the stable, he found the stabler tending to the mule. The stabler was a woman. She had half a left leg and half a right arm. The woman looked up at the man as he approached. Her face was also misshapen and bent. Her azure eyes cast in an eternal wayward glance unto some other sky.
Your friend here is doing better. She believes that you have a real chance at making it.
Making it?
You know, the ascent.
Is that what this place is? A place of losers, drifters, and would-be saints who had big ideas but no backbone to go all the way? He placed the 2 pails of apples and carrots down beside the mule and the woman. The mule's eyes lit up, and the woman graciously fed her. "Empty those out," said the man, eyeing the pails. The woman did so.
He took the empty pails to the well and soon brought fresh water.
So when will you leave?
The woman asked. On the morrow, as soon as the ass can travel.
It's too soon. You must gather your strength, both of you.
Or what? Did you or the barkeep or the fellows at the gates meticulously prepare for whatever the hell this is? I have no idea what this is, but I can tell you that the time is now. This is all I know. If my friend here is not able to walk, I will carry her, as I have before. All I know is that it's time to move forward, now. The stabler lowered her head at first, but then, as if something rare and beautiful had occurred to her, she nodded her head with vibrant enthusiasm.
Yes, I like this ass man. I believe you have a chance.
She said solemnly. Ass man, are you kidding me? Without looking up from her labors at feeding and watering the mule, she simply said,
This is what the others are calling you.
The man was upset at first, but then realized that such things never matter. How much do I owe you for the night? As we'll be leaving one way or the other on the morn. The woman stood. When she did, she was nearly as tall as the man. She did not waver on her one leg. She did not waver.
She looked him deeply in the eyes and said,
Don't fuck this up. You can do this. I can tell. I can smell it on you. Transcendence. And so can your friend here.
They both looked at the ass, lying on that heap of hay. With a full carrot dangling from her mouth, the mule looked on them as amicably as she was able, amid her feeding.
I don't know what this is. I don't know where I'm going. I just know that I'm moving forward,
he said. The woman nodded in recognition. She thought to say something else, but instead reached into the pouch she had strapped around her neck and which she bore at her side. From this pouch she took a horn. He saw what she held, and then regarded the woman again. Before he could ask, she said to him,
Take this with you. There may come a time when you think that you have managed everything, that you have succeeded in working a miracle, but remember, the only true meaningful miracles never serve just one person's purpose. If you come to a point where there's even any doubt about what's right, about what the world needs, remember that it starts with you and that you are not alone. If you blow the horn, you will be aided by a host of people who come to you at a similar point. But for whatever reason, they were not able to transcend because they were too mired in their own ideals, and they forgot about the most important thing in all of us, our humanity.
The man took the horn and thanked the woman. I'm exhausted through and through, and I cannot feel my own body, he said, laughing. How the hell am I going to go any further? She smiled sympathetically.
Get some sleep then. You have a hard way ahead.
As she reached the threshold of the stable, she turned.
Do something special, Roland. Be something more. It's what you were born for.
Then she went away. The recollection of a name circling in his mind and on his tongue. Roland.
The man was awakened on the morn by big sloppy licks all over his face. He twisted and tried to turn away, but the liquor was relentless. When he opened his eyes, he saw that big tongue coming in for another go at licking him, and just only managed to get both his hands around the tongue's head to redirect it. The beast tried to shake free of his hands, but now he sat up in the bed of hay and saw something that took his breath away. He had indeed expected to see his dear mule friend there, playfully cajoling him. Instead, he saw the most rare and beautiful sight that he had ever beheld. It was an astonishing white mare. He had never seen such a regal and elegant horse. The man stood and, still holding the beautiful creature at her jowls, looked into her eyes and placed his forehead against hers. We're in this together, through all our changes. The mare fluttered her eyes and snuggled her head closer to his. He spent a few minutes packing the remaining carrots and apples into his satchel, and he filled 3 skins that the stablewoman had given him with the well water. The water somehow seemed to be imbued with regenerative properties, and the man thought that this was indeed a blessing.
Soon the man and the mare were ready, and the two emerged from the stable side by side. They turned to the right and moved purposely along the narrow, snow-swept road. They passed the well and then the inn. As they went past the latter of these, the man saw the eyeless barkeep peering at him through a narrow crack in the boarded window. The sun was rising onto its station in the eastern sky. The air was cold and crisp, but the man felt alive and emboldened by a sense of purpose he did not yet understand. He and the mare came unto the gates at the other end of that strange and ancient place. The same 2 drunkards fell out of the flimsy perch from which they had been keeping watch forever. The second drunkard stepped forth and said,
Hold it right there and state your purpose.
Roland sighed. Haven't we been through this before?
The second drunkard looked over his shoulder at the first, and they both shrugged their shoulders.
Well, yeah, I suppose we have. That don't change the fact that you still have to state your purpose for going through these gates and doing whatever it is people do up there. I don't know. I really have no idea. See, as I never made it past the first plateau, and me mate here didn't even make it that far. That was, of course, before they had the likes of me, and I'm making sure anyone who makes the attempt is worthy, of course, such.
He said whilst prying a coarse, stubborn snot from his nose. The man looked at the mare, who neighed in protestation against the foolishness and the delay. All right, we're on a quest. The 2 drunkards pursed their lips and nodded. The first of the 2 called out from behind his colleague.
That's better. What sort of quest, then?
The man lowered his head in frustration and kicked at some ice chips in the snow at his feet. Finally, he raised his head and said earnestly, The sort of quest that were one to speak it out loud, any chance of its success and all the magic in its undertaking would certainly be undone. The drunkards considered this for a moment. The first drew nearer to the second to whisper something in his ear. The 2 men nodded, and in unison they turned to the man and the mare and said,
Right. Off you go, then.
They turned and hurried about releasing the winches and wheels, the gadgets and links that kept the gates closed against the beyond for all eternity. Save those rare occasions when one dares to do something special. Something human.
The gates groaned against the disruption of their long hibernation in the snow, but soon enough they opened. The man nodded at the drunkards as he and the mare passed through the gates. When they came onto the base of the first ascent, the first drunkard asked of the second,
What do you think? Any chance?
The second scraped at the frozen stubble on his chin and said,
Nah, not in this lifetime.
The first nodded and began to laugh when a thought occurred to him.
Yeah, but what lifetime is this, anyway?
The other looked at him annoyedly.
That's quite enough out of you, then. Come on, let's close these bloody gates before it starts.
And so they did. Close the gates.
Somehow, it had not occurred to the 2 drunkards amid their long watch at the gates that nothing could start until they closed them. Nothing at all. The man and the mare leaned into the first ascent with bold determination. Despite the early hour, the sun had somehow fallen away from the sky, and the winds had gathered and begun to swirl all around them. Somewhere in the distance, Roland could swear that he heard that strange violin music from the inn resounding. It began to snow, and the incline they faced was more steep than either of them had ere attempted. Nevertheless, they reached the first plateau sometime around what the man guessed must have been midday. It wasn't just that the sun was not there. Neither were the moon or the stars. They were making the ascent in utter darkness. The man found a narrow fissure in the rock facing along the crag, and he led the mare within so that they could rest for a while. He fed the mare some carrots and several cubes of sugar that the woman at the stable must have snuck in the satchel. He ate an apple, and the two of them drank some water from the first of the skins. After a spell, he patted the mare on her flank and encouraged her in some obscure language he did not know. It occurred to him that she must be freezing, and he concluded that he soon must find some wood so that they could have a fire at the next waypoint. In the meantime, he removed his great wolfskin cloak and he threw it over her back. He replaced his satchel and axe over each of his shoulders, and then they set out once more. They journeyed on and on, further, higher. The wind was howling like a chorus of devils raging against damnation. The man gritted his teeth, smiled, and leaned into the ascent. "Bring it," he muttered aloud.
Further up ahead, in a field at the edge of the western sky, there was fire. The man's heart beat with hope and excitement, but soon saw that this was not a fire unto itself. It was a fire born of conflagration. Two little armies climbed over one another and hacked away at flesh, bone, and ideal, for all their inability to recognize the value of reasonable opposition. Catapulted iron orbs and heavy armored wagons contused and cut the fragile earth, and from these wounds arose bilious green fumes that became as flames when mixed with the madness spewed forth on the battle cries of men. The man turned away and dejectedly urged the mare further still. At the next plateau, the man found some naked trees alongside the path. He cut them with his axe, and soon they had a fire. The mare looked on the man with warm, admiring eyes as he fed her an apple and some more sugar. They drank some more water and finished the first skin. The man guessed that it must have been evening, though there was no way of knowing for the constant darkness all around. The fire warmed them, but somehow the man sensed that time was of the essence, if they needed to hasten unto whatever end.
But what was it they were attempting? To what could any of it lead? He had no idea. There was just something inside that told him they had to keep going, no matter what. On and on they journeyed, further, higher. From the murk and the dross through which they moved arose the sound of distant, sinister laughter. Of a sudden, the darkness spawned massive, curling, barren trees that enfolded the path. One by one, hooded bodies swung in at them from the crooked limbs. It was a forest of corpses. It was as if the man and mare were journeying through a tunnel of hell itself. Further ahead, some of the corpses were no longer hooded. There were women and men, even children, swaying like ideas subjected to stillness.
Their mouths had been stitched shut. Some of them had signs fastened to their tattered and bloodied clothing. On the signs there were scribbled runes. The mare looked unto the man, and he conjured the language from some obscure place. He spoke the words aloud. "Disagree at your own peril." As he said these words, from out of the darkness, an arrow pierced his chest. He staggered forwards, and the mare rose up on her two hind legs and neighed fiercely. The man did not fall. He extended his right arm towards his companion. She lowered herself to him, and he swung himself up. She bolted into a full gallop with her friend laying across her back, ducking to negotiate the low-reaching limbs of those dire trees, taking each turn of the narrow pathway with such violent grace and mastery, it was as if she had ridden out of the pages of some ancient poetic ballad to restore hope and honor unto the world. She sprinted for the next plateau. She sprinted for light and for love. She sprinted for hope. And filled with all of these, coming unto the far edge of the forest of corpses and stilled ideas,
something tripped her. Something that was not there, but was. The beautiful and bold white mare tumbled forth, conjuring all of her will as she did to take the few necessary strides they needed to emerge from the nightmare and reach the plateau. Then the two of them fell into a heap on a desolate patch of ice. Somewhere in their wake arose that sinister laughter. The two of them closed their eyes.
Who knows how much time had passed to that point in their journey, or indeed how much longer it was before the man finally regained consciousness. There were snow flurries urging him to rise, though he was pinned beneath the weight of the mare who had heroically brought them there. When he tried to move, the wound surrounding the arrow in his chest gargled. He gritted his teeth and said aloud, "Fuck you!" He strained and used all of his might to shift himself into a configuration of form that would allow him to move out from under her. He stood and, without looking, snapped the arrow in half. He took a skin of water from his satchel and fell onto his knees at the side of the mare. At least 2 of her legs were broken.
He poured the water into her mouth. He smoothed the water onto her head and rubbed the water into her legs. Her eyes fluttered open. They looked at one another, and the man murmured to her in some obscure language ancient tales of courage and overcoming obstacles. Against all odds, he opened another skin of water, their last, and he repeated the ritual. He helped her drink, and he bathed her with broken limbs in that wonderful water from the well. He fed her the last of the carrots, apples, and sugar cubes. He sang to her of great kings and queens who loved one another and humanity more than any territory, dominion, or supposed possession. The cold and the darkness along the ascent had blistered him to the point of disfigurement. He could scarcely lift his head for the weight of imminent failure. How could it have come to this, he wondered? Why such an end? But somewhere in the bleak darkness, somewhere impossibly high upon that mountain path, he heard the violin music from the inn. It was thunderous and mysterious. It was a challenge. It was an invocation.
Then he remembered the horn. He struggled to take the satchel once more. He reached in and took the horn. Roland brought it to his lips, and with his eyes cast onto the infinite and black ether, he blew. He waited. Nothing happened. He blew again. And then the veil of darkness was lifted. The sky opened up. The sun burst through on a chorus of doves. He fell back down and smiled. After a few moments, he lifted himself up once more to regard the mare. She was still there, still breathing, still waiting for the man to become more.
He regarded the horn, almost as an afterthought, as if somehow that obscure language were reminding him of that which was and could be again. He pressed the back of the horn onto her noble forehead, and then he beheld something truly wondrous. She raised her noble forehead unto the horn, and the two became as one, and the mare became as unicorn.
Some hours later, further and higher still along that harrowing ascent, the unicorn marched purposefully unto the ancient gates at the rooftop of the world. The man had lost consciousness long ago. He was lain cross her back. He was not long for the coil. But upon the cessation of movement, he opened his eyes. He beheld the gates, and with a groan, he allowed himself to drip off of the unicorn's back into a heap on the snow. As if on cue, the two drunkards tumbled down from their watcher's perch on high, and this time ran out to greet the newcomers. The first drunkard patted the unicorn with wonder, whilst the others set about smacking Roland's face repeatedly.
Hey, wake up, you lot. Hold. Where are you? Where you are, and state your purpose.
Roland's eyes fluttered open. Hold? Where you are? Really? He groaned and coughed up blood as he did. The second drunkard persisted. He peered in at Roland and demanded,
State it. You state it, you silly person.
The wounded man groaned again. This time blood oozed out of both his chest and the side of his mouth.
He started to drift off again. The first drunkard desisted in patting the unicorn and stopped over to kick Roland on the backs of his legs.
Hey, you come all this way, so just bloody state it.
The second chimed in.
Yeah, just bloody state it.
Snow flurries tickled the man's cheeks and lips and eyelids. Finally, he said, My purpose is to show people the power of belief in self, in one another, and in magical hope. Without these things, we are nothing, and we will come unto nothing. As if on cue, the two drunkards sprang up and stood at full attention. They said as one,
Right, off you go then. Free to enter.
The unicorn neighed in pointed agitation, and the two realized that the man wasn't going anywhere without some assistance. They carried him unto the stable, and there he slept.
Hours went by, perhaps days. When Roland awoke, the stablewoman from before was looking down at him. It was her, and yet it was not. She was breathtaking. She was whole in all her former tatters. Her eyes were as emeralds gleaming in the winter's morn's sun.
Welcome back, good sir,
she said.
How long was I gone?
Who knows? None of that really matters here. What matters is that when we return and champion the right things in life, in this life, the noble things, the magical things.
When he smiled, it felt as if his face would flake off.
May I please have some water?
Of course.
She brought a skin onto his lips, and he drank deeply. As he was drinking, he noticed that she had a tiny pink scar at the center of her forehead. She saw that he had seen this.
Hello, Roland,
she said with a warm smile.
Hello.
This poem is called Or We Could Sing. Awaken with a song to sing, for what deep dreamers might yet bring to static states depressed in time, for lack of those who bleed the lines. Amid fervent pleas of parody, as they're lauding mediocrity, for devils and the deep blue sea disrupt the continuity. Mired at the mast, forget the cost, transcendent songs are never lost. Atlantis, in the distant hours, bilious politics and insect towers, came unto threshold, dark to light. I only want to breathe delight. In ocean's emerald eyes, your eyes, I lift this song unto the skies. The architects of all we know, that which will reap from what we sow, will come of how we choose to voice convictions rendered in the choice. Of what it is we wish to bring, we could despair, or we could sing.